I'm really happy with kind of physically, emotionally, mentally where I am now in a way that, I'm so grateful for, because I honestly didn't know if it was possible to get to this point. I keep hitting new highs, and that is so exciting for me, as that, and I think that that's similar, and that's echoed in kind of the feedback that we get from people that we work with. So, these tools, this approach, is not about some, remedial, rehab to get to a certain baseline. This is about the stuff that helps your body work and continue to excel regardless of where you are and where you need to get to.
Welcome to the Hope and Help podcast, where we talk about science and science-based tools for fatigue and chronic illness. I'm your host, Haylie Pomroy, #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Fast Metabolism Diet, a leading health and wellness expert, and you guys got it, I am now a PhD student in neuroimmunology. Just like you, I am a lifelong learner and a fierce advocate for those in need of a little bit of help and hope. Today, we're going to tackle just that: patient advocacy, how to communicate with your physician, how to get through the difficult times that you're getting through right now. I, of course, have our fearless leader, Dr. Nancy Klimas. Dr. Klimas is the director of the Institute of Neuro Immune Medicine. Dr. Klimas has brought two very special guests, Katie and Andrea. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us here. We're really excited.
And Dr. Klimas, thank you so much for bringing us all together. This is going to be a really good conversation about, what to do when you find yourself in a situation that you don't really feel like you have hope about. So Dr. Klimas, I just want to thank you for bringing these kinds of things together. We all talk about how we kind of have a clinic without walls, right? You're always bringing people into the tribe, into our community that are from different areas, different perspectives, and it just enriches everybody's patient experience. So Dr. Klimas, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Dr. Klimas, tell me a little bit about how you met Katie and Andrea.
Well, I just met Andrea, so this is good for me, so I'm looking forward to knowing her. But I met Katie in a very funny way. And just last month, we were going to a meeting together at the NIH. They had a recovery initiative meeting on clinical trials, and we were both going there for different reasons. And I was trying to keep up with her while we were climbing up this rather steep hill, for me, the Florida legs lady. And I was having trouble keeping up with her. And she told me about some of her long COVID journey as a patient and as an advocate. And I was just blown away about how much she took charge of her own life to find her own answers, and how important that is for anyone suffering from these long-term illnesses to be in charge and not give the reins off to somebody else to take care of them. So I was hoping that I could engage her in a conversation just on her own recovery, when I discovered she had, through her own experience and Andrea's, created an organization of their own to share that kind of message.
So Katie, let me start with you. Dr. Klimas already gave us a little bit of information about that you found yourself with long COVID. Can you just kind of tell me how that all transpired? What happened?
Sure. My background is I'm an economist and sociologist by training, and sort of for 2020, early 2020, I was living and working in London, actually working for the National Health Service there, doing population health management and kind of contracting design. And as the pandemic was sort of, I think on the horizon, hadn't yet fully hit. I ended up with COVID in one of the really early waves, kind of at the same time that the analytics team that I was running was starting to pivot towards, helping with the response to the pandemic and figuring out, how many wards were going to be needed to support people who are going to be sick. So it was kind of a really interesting time. And a really weird position to be in, of being,
Right.
Kind of ill, but also, trying to still work through it as well as I could. And I think in hindsight, that was a really bad decision in terms of increasing the risk factors for long COVID, because, I figured, I was pretty healthy person. I'd never really had any health issues. And, there was a lot going on and a lot of work needed to be done, and I would be okay. But basically what happened is I just never really ended up getting better. I experienced, elevated heart rate, kind of brain fog, fatigue, breathing difficulties, and that whole kind of summer after getting ill in March 2020, was still having symptoms regularly, and at that time, there was a lot of sort of rumors going around about people kind of trading information on the side, but there wasn't a lot of awareness at that point about what it was or what was going on. And so I think I feel like it probably took me far too long to really get underneath it, and I hadn't yet found the unbelievable sort of patient community that's ended up forming. But I think once I tapped into that and kind of had enough of my own symptoms and really grasped the nettle to do something about it.
Right. But Katie, to your point, I heard you say that, maybe you should have taken time off. But really in the beginning, I think everybody thought that, this was going to clear our bodies in 14 days. If we didn't end up with the cytokine storm, we didn't end up hospitalized, we were fortunate that we didn't have a lot of comorbidities, that this was something that we were going to clear, that was going to clear in our bodies. And Dr. Klimas, I would love, from an immunology perspective, you've talked to us clinically a lot about the fact that, that's what we thought, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Was it that what we knew with this particular type of virus? Because they were saying, in 14 days, it's going to clear the body. As long as you make it out of those 14 days, you're fine. As not obviously what we're seeing clinically, but why was that the belief system in the beginning?
Oh, I think this is, do you remember that we just stopped the whole world for 2 weeks and said we could stop the whole epidemic that way?
Oh, yeah. I was in Florida. Yes, I do.
Optimism on the part of all of us who were just shaken by a pandemic. And the idea that there would be this horrible consequence of a pandemic to have millions and millions of people still ill today from an illness that was triggered by their COVID infection. And let's not get it wrong, they are still getting triggered by their COVID infections. There's new long COVID cases each and every day. I think that's the most amazing, weird thing that people have decided that's done too. That's crazy. We see new long COVID every single day.
Right.
But, anyway, what you were suffering from back then, Katie, was the unbridled optimism of human nature. And you thought, hey, it's going to be okay. And so, and that's, I think, exactly what was going on. It still goes on. This sense is, it can be them, but not me.
Hey guys, it's Haylie Pomroy, your host. Right about now, you're probably struggling to achieve the health that you deserve, and you're just not sure what you need to do in order to get it. So what I've done is I've created a special link for you that will give you the nutrition and supplement programs that I use in my private practice to achieve amazing results for my clients and my community. Go to HayliePomroy.com/podcast. Plus, when you use that link, you'll get a 20% discount just because I love you. Again, that's HayliePomroy.com/podcast. Now, back to the episode. And I think too, Dr. Klimas, sometimes when maybe you're an individual that's, like we were all in the healthcare space, right? You were in the analytics aspect of the healthcare space. It was kind of like I felt like there was an obligation is if you're strong enough to fight the fight, we need to stay there and we need to stay involved and we need to be advocates for people and we need to keep working and we need to keep going. I mean, we had doctors showing up, seeing their patients even on telehealth that had COVID themselves and they're still seeing patients. Fairness, I just don't think we knew, the value of or the impact that it was going to make on our immune system, the potential for viral reactivation, and the value of truly resting. I mean, societally in the States, it's a weakness, right? If you take off work. And so it's different culturally everywhere, but I think that didn't help, I guess.
Hey, there's two things to that. I mean, yes, maybe, perhaps in your case, Katie, had you taken a few extra weeks off, you might have gotten better. but perhaps not.
Right.
Okay. So let's be very clear. You already had something triggered at the time of your acute infection that was symptomatic. Okay. And you may or may not have been able to shake the rest of that, whatever, because we don't know what the whatever is. We still don't know right now, 4 years later, if what happened to you in the 2 or 3 or 4 weeks around that infection created a new disease, like an autoimmune disease, or if it was a persistent infection like COVID, or that it was a viral reactivation like EBV. These are all very viable hypotheses that are being pursued, or maybe some weird combination of those three. So I'm often telling my patients, which is not what this podcast is supposed to be about. So let's get back to how
we love it.
But I'm telling my patients not to feel guilty about what you did at the time of the infection, because what you did was your human nature. You tried to plow on, you pushed on through, you did your thing that we've all been taught to do, and you tried to take care of the whole wide world, which is what you're trying to do at a time of a pandemic. And quite frankly, you're still trying to do that. So
I was going to say, has she stopped yet?
Not to say that we want you to stop, but I love that you laid that out that way, because I hear that all the time.
Right.
And then I heard what Haylie says, that advocacy itself, while absolutely necessary, affirming, and important, can be incredibly damaging, and be very, very careful about how you do that. Because I've seen other people who took it on to the point of relapsing in a way that they can't get back. So just a better little cautionary tale.
Andrea, tell me give me your perspective on this.
So I came in the whole picture when Katie already felt better, because I was living at a very secure place, like in the woods in upstate New York. And so things came very late, I would say, into our area. And for me, what happened when the pandemic happened was, so I have like a little sidetrack here. I had on my bucket list for my educational program, psychoneuroimmunology, and I wanted to do it in Germany because I'm from German, and I wanted to understand it in my language because it's complicated enough. So I wanted to at least understand it in my own language. And what happened then was I could do it from my home in upstate New York, because now everything went online.
Right.
And I actually heard about long COVID the first time in the second year of this education, that this might come up. And if you want to specialize in anything, this would be one area which will have a lot of need. But when I met Katie, I'm also a personal trainer, and my background is I'm a professional Olympic athlete. I was competing for Germany for a long, long time. In the sport of biathlon, is cross-country skiing and shooting. So it's something totally different. So I became a personal trainer after my career. And that's why when I started all this different education and how to be healthy all over, and how the systems in the body function together. And so I had this Monday morning class, and when Katie it felt good enough to come to this class she heard about, she came and then immediately saw exercises or like, we can call it exercise. Sometimes like fillers for my exercises that trigger the nervous system and support the function of the brain, like brain-body connection. And she thought, oh, this is just found in all my researches that this can help long COVID. And now I have all these exercises, these little exercises you can do on a daily basis. And so she came to me and asked if we can create something together to help so many people who need some help.
My name is Jimmy Orocho. I am a veteran of the 1990-1991 Persian Gulf War, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I work for Dr. Nancy Klimas at the Institute for Neuro Immune Medicine in Nova Southeastern University. We are in Davie, Florida. We are Gulf War illness clinical researchers in the need for research participants. By participating, you will help yourself and your fellow veterans, contributing to the discovery of the cause of Gulf War illness and how to best treat the illness. Our telephone number, 954-262-2870. Our email, QuickTick, Golf Whiskey India Charlie Tango India Charlie at nova.edu. We do also decentralized clinical trials. That means that you may be able to participate in this research from your hometown. Thank you very much.
Dr. Klimas, when you see a patient that's got long COVID and they're struggling, and Katie, I want you to give us kind of some indication of what your personal journey was like. Are you seeing a variety of symptoms in people? Are there things that we're finding are common with people that have the long COVID diagnosis? What are we seeing in clinic?
So I think, as you've suggested, the symptoms vary, and we know that there are over 200 documented symptoms of long COVID, and they can range importantly in severity as well as what they are. But I think commonly are things like fatigue, brain fog, difficulty with memory, or pulling the right words out that you're looking for. Also things like...
Were you experiencing that, Katie? Was that what you...
Yeah, so I had a combination personally of brain fog, sleep disruption. I also had elevated heart rate. And, I think, and pain, fatigue, so I think that, I've heard the term like a soup of symptoms. And I think that's such a good description, because, it is a very, an odd, from a clinical perspective, it's a really odd mix of symptoms that don't necessarily seem fully related all the time. And, the question is, how, am I just falling apart? And I think from my previous work looking at population health management, we were actually looking at, pre-pandemic at people with what we were calling at the time unexplained symptoms. And I think, I'm kind of sheepish and I'm a little bit embarrassed to say now, very much recognize this as, post-infection, or exposure to toxicity, et cetera. Right. So I think in a lot of ways, I feel, grateful to have been sort of, primed in a way to really understand some of the mechanisms differently than maybe people who, hadn't had that professional exposure. And similarly for, things like, environmental toxins, we were charting the path, and, people who had asthma, and, it basically looked like a roadmap of London. So, this is the links between, kind of what's going on out there in the world and what people are experiencing in their body is so strong, and the evidence has been there before, but I think that this is helping, broaden the understanding. I know I had a friend, who's had ME/CFS for a very long time and been dealing with these symptoms, that were very similar to long COVID. And, they started to say, well, I'm really, thank goodness for long COVID. And then they kind of stopped themselves. And that's not really what I mean. But, the point that they're trying to make was really on the money, which is that, these things have been underappreciated, as you well know, Haylie, for a really long time. And that, maybe with the increased scale of long COVID, this is an opportunity to get more visibility and, more mainstream exposure.
So what is ThriveNinety? How did it come to be? What is it? And how do we engage with it?
Great. So I think the initial kind of nub of the question is how did we come up with what we do now? And, I think, again, one of the, and Andrea's background is amazing, and obviously had to, eke out every ounce of performance, during her professional career. And, my approach, and my exposure to some of these concepts happened actually when, as an economist, I got asked to support, some work around, mental health, policy and payment development, and kind of making the case for funding mental health. And was involved with some work around, testing different types of therapies and looking at what therapies were really effective for people. And there was some interesting things coming out with some of that work and, really talented clinicians who needed me to understand, their world. So gave me unbelievable crash courses, around, things very simple, activities, movements, that really supported nervous system health, that were being impactful for people with, a really diverse range of clinical issues like low level anxiety, depression, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, this whole suite of different conditions that, on the surface didn't have a lot to do with one another. But, there's clearly a common element there. And that was one of those little facts that just lodged in my mind. And as we were trying to understand, the kind of population health work around the unexplained symptoms, that was sort of kind of cycling around. And then, and then I was in the really, interesting and unique position, potentially to go from, doing that work to then being kind of very much on the other end and experiencing this range of symptoms and these really, interesting things that were, that couldn't be explained with what a lot of people were trying to kind of dismiss them as, oh, well, you're getting older, or, you recently had a child, and, kind of all of these other sort of more natural explanations. And so, jumping ahead, I kind of went back to some of that work around the nervous system and, found great resources through things like the Polyvagal Institute, but lots of other reading as well, around, really practical exercises, activities, tools that you could use that didn't take very much energy, didn't take very much time, and could really make a big impact. And so, I kind of, started with that hypothesis. Well, maybe it's my vagus nerve and I have nothing to lose because I've had enough of this.
Katie, I just want to ask you, how are you doing today? How are you today as we sit here on this podcast?
I feel great today, I guess, but I think I'm, as you probably, recognize, Haylie, I am a different person than at the start of all this. So it's, I think that to say, oh, I'm back to myself pre-pandemic, I don't think that will ever exist or happen. But I know that I feel, kind of healthy and strong, and, I think I'm, in eating better than I probably ever have in my life. And, I'm really happy with kind of physically, emotionally, mentally where I am now in a way that, I'm so grateful for, because I honestly didn't know if it was possible to get to this point. And one of the things that's really interesting that I think we'll bring in, kind of what Andrea is going to touch on in a minute, is that, I keep hitting new highs, and that is so exciting for me, as that, and I think that that's similar, and that's echoed in kind of the feedback that we get from people that we work with. So, these tools, this approach, is not about some, remedial, rehab to get to a certain baseline. This is about the stuff that helps your body work and continue to excel regardless of where you are and where you need to get to.
And take us through, what specifically did you do to get better? Like what got you on your journey?
So I think it's, it was definitely kicked off when I started, looking at that kind of nervous system alignment activities. But I'll say that it was supercharged and accelerated when connected with Andrea, and we really started to, get into other tools to, to bring in, some more profound nervous system realignment, working on, gut health, working on things like, inflammation reduction, which has been a massive component. And also, I think pacing and, tapping into the phenomenal resources that are available through, kind of all of the kind of, autoimmune communities and the kind of long-term condition communities that existed, and I've been working on for a very long time, tapping into that and kind of taking it to the next level in terms of our own practice and approach and weaving it into this balance of activity and rest, and reducing exposure to toxins and introducing things that give you joy and energy, and kind of finding those balances, I think, has been really important.
Absolutely. And Andrea, can you give us some of the specifics of the program?
Yeah, sure. So we really wanted to make it complex because we can come from different angles when we support our body to feel better and support our nervous system also to function better. And it's all about, we want to have our brain feel safe. This makes sense because when the brain is under threat because of whatever goes on in the body, either it's the gut or some joints, it has to deal with something. And we wanted to basically free up areas that take space and take energy also for the immune system to do its job. So seeing it from a triangle position, our metabolic system, whatever we move, use our muscles to do the things so many people cannot do anymore because it takes so much energy, because already the immune system taking so much energy, and then the brain is there and wants to have energy. So then you have brain fog, and also your muscles don't work anymore, and you cannot exercise in the way you used to, or go around the block anymore.
Right.
And we know that the immune system is taking all this energy. So now we use, for example, specific movements for the joints too, because when our proprioceptive system is more in line with the brain doesn't need to take so much care of where I am in space anymore, and it frees up energy for the immune system or for the metabolic system, so we can walk a little further. So we use maybe simple mobility exercise for the joints, or we open up the whole structure, the fascia, through specific fascia stretches, not just stretch, but to trigger the system a little bit that the fascia opens up. And again, it opens up basically energy for the immune system to function, for the brain to function, and also for the muscle to have more energy.
So do people sign up for classes? Is it online? Talk me through the practicality of it, right?
So for us, first, we are living in upstate New York. There's not much around. So we would have a really far way to travel anywhere, but also we knew that people with long COVID might not travel far and are not able to travel far. And then if they travel, then they maybe don't have energy anymore to do anything.
Right.
And for us, it was really important that we can deliver it into everywhere where they are. So it's an online program, and
wonderful.
It basically guides our participants step by step through the whole program. It's 16 weeks, so 12 units, very structured with some buffer, and really taking out the guesses and just follow the program how it is, and also engaging with the participants. So it's not just here's your program, do what you can. We also want to have interactions with them. Of course, everything starts with a assessment, because Katie needs data.
That's what I was going to say. I want Katie to have data. Katie, like I said, I love this combination. Why did you come up with the name ThriveNinety?
Great question. So this is kind of a simple one. We both love to ski. I'm more alpine and Andrea is obviously more cross country. But Thrive is obviously thriving because, I think, and I think very deliberately, getting back to your other question, this is not necessarily about recovery. This is about thriving and, living your best life and, being well and being happy. And then the 90 part is actually, Andrea said that her personal ambition was to be skiing when she was 90 years old. And I said, that sounds just fine to me. Let's incorporate it in the name.
So I'd love for you to tell the folks that listen to this podcast more about the things that really worked for you and make it a little personal. And also, as folks that work with a lot of people now with illness, what are your top 3 things that really help people? So it's just like a pearls. What are your top pearls of wisdom that you might give us?
Great. So I think I can talk about my routine. So, I think I've really embraced an anti-inflammatory diet. That's been huge. And have a routine of kind of daily movements in the morning, and honestly do them as kind of stress reducers through the day, as well. And ankle movements and eye movements, that are amazing at sort of resetting the nervous system and the body. And there's some great ways that you can do some personal assessments to figure out which things give you impact. And these are really great for me. And we actually share some of our higher impact ones, the ones that people have a lot of success with, on our website, with free tools. But I think that and really embracing pacing and reducing the overall sort of toxic load in the environment as part of pacing, looking at that overall energy envelope, as things that you want to do, but also things that you're exposed to. I think that's been a massive game changer for me and for a lot of the people that I work with. Is, it's a more sophisticated view of pacing, but it's not about rest. It's about balancing and prioritizing what you want to spend your energy on.
Katie, can you just tell me what the website is really quick?
Yep. It's www.ThriveNinety.com, and that's all spelled out, ThriveNinety.
Perfect. That's great. So there's assessments on there, guys. There's tips and tools. Make sure you dig in there and see. But if we have diet, strategic movement, and then strategic placement of your energy as an asset, that is going to stick with me, and looking at pacing from that perspective, and also what negatively can be monopolizing your energy, like the environment, toxins, those types of things. That's really, I think, meaningful for people out there that are struggling. Andrea, talk to me about the movement aspect of it.
Yes, me coming from an Olympic sports background, I really every time make the point that we need a good foundation, because the stronger our foundation is, and it's like a general foundation, not like a specific one for a specific sport back in the day. So now it's not for something specifically, but a general strong foundation, every time helps to build up from there. And so that's why I also like to use different exercises and different tools, maybe in the same concept, but variation. And variation is also good for eating, like eating a lot of variety, and also moving in a different ways to build up this foundation. Because when we have a strong foundation, if we have a tough time with something, it's better to bounce off because we don't fall as far.
So I think this is such an interesting concept, that we've really incorporated into our program, because I think the free tools that we share on our resources page, are a great way in. But I think that that point about variety is so valuable to touch on, because, we know that there's, neurologic damage and cell damage that come as part of the implications often for long COVID. And so, we like to think about ways to harness the kind of neuroplasticity and the regeneration capacity in your body. And, doing, one set of eye movements can be really impactful, but if you can do, similar things in slightly different ways, then you can get even more benefit out of them. And some of those options may benefit some people more than others. And, I think we try to use self-assessment tools so that people can understand, which ones are really giving them the most. But even if it's not giving you as much as some others, there's still benefit in that variety, because it's kind of encouraging your body to, just to kind of stretch itself in different ways, all within a safe bound. But I think that breadth of activity can be really powerful when you have systemic issues like long COVID.
From an immune perspective, Dr. Klimas, is there something that that this type of diversity in therapy speaks to in rebalancing the immune system?
Absolutely. I just love listening to you all because there've been a number of, first I want to define something, the term neuroplasticity, which I love. Not everyone understands, but the idea here is another one that really is very hopeful for those of you that need a little extra hope. You can have damage to a brain or to an organ or to something, and the body is programmed to heal. It's supposed to heal, but the brain is a very special place. You have to use it to grow it. You just have to. So if you get into a bad habit because it makes you feel bad, in the autonomic dysfunction, I have some patients that go to bed and stay laying down forever. Now their body doesn't know what upright is anymore. They just don't know how. But if they suddenly went from flat to upright, they would feel, I mean, not talking in moments they feel bad, but every single day. If they did it too quickly and they didn't come back slowly, they wouldn't give their time enough for the brain to grow that section back, right? So there's a pace to regrowing your brain, as well as the need to do it and to challenge it, to ask it to do it so that it will try. And that just makes tons of good sense. If you've ever had your muscle in your leg in a cast, that side gets really small. The muscle disappears, right? And now you've got this weird looking body with a skinny leg and a fat leg. But after a while, your leg comes back because you asked it to and you worked it until you grew the muscle back. And the same thing's true in the brain. You have to do those types of retraining exercises. There's another program online for MECFS, the Gupta program, which is amazing. It's the same thing. It's retraining the brain, not exactly the same, but similar, but retraining the brain, making your brain work and learning to regrow the pathways that have been damaged. Physically, when we look in the brain, there is damage, these tiny little dots of damage that have screwed up the normal wiring of the brain. But if you work it, it will grow new wiring around the damaged areas. And so it's important not to feel yourself permanently damaged. Okay. That's super, super important. I love this whole thing on this program. Now you asked, what about homeostasis? Our group does really fancy AI/computational biology science, trying to understand the homeostatic networks that are going on in ME/CFS and long COVID. And one thing that we can say is, there's a lot of interactive systems. Well, we knew that. Psychoneuroimmunology, that's your field. It's all about interactive systems. It's the immune system, the endocrine system, the autonomic nervous system. They all crosstalk and balance each other. And in health, you're in a certain balance. I'm going to make this a scoop. In health, you're in a certain balance where you're in a valley between mountains. And every time you get a little bit sick, you climb up a mountain, get a little bit out of homeostasis. But when you get well, you fall back into the valley and you're good again. What happens in MECFS, what happens in long COVID is you climb the mountain and fell down the other side. And now your balance is not the healthy balance you used to be in, but it's still a balance. It's just a sick balance. So to get back from unhealthy, sick balance back to well balanced, you got to climb the mountain again and come back down the other side. And our research is all about how to climb that mountain in really fancy ways, all kinds of, in silico clinical trials, supercomputers, trying to design studies that tell you how to climb the mountain. But one thing every single design comes back to is you can't just push one button. You can't just push the immune system and make it well. You can't just push the autonomic nervous system and make it well. You have to understand the network of things that are communicating in a way and try to make them all healthier to get them back up over the mountain. So when you talk in a personalized way, this person has a lot of microbiome, GI dysfunction. That's an important part. It's screaming at the immune system, turning things on, sending signals to the vagal nerve that are sick. All kinds of things are going on in that microbiome that's messed up. So your anti-inflammatory diet, tons of good sense. Absolutely terrific. Not likely to show up in my weird computational science because it's not a drug. It's a lifestyle that changes your microbiome. So that's really important. Dysautonomia, massive and huge in long COVID. It's often the very first symptom that appears in acute COVID that persists into long COVID. It's like often the first big noticeable thing. So obviously a really important thing to put back into balance. And when your balance is way whacked so that you're getting a whole lot of adrenaline and not nearly enough vagal nerve, when you're stuck like this, You're not sleeping. Your gut's not working. You're not even breathing right. Everything's wrong. So trying to get things back into this normal balance of vagal and sympathetic tone of adrenaline and the opposite. Super important. And it can be done. How do you do it? Not with a drug. It's a whole bunch of things you got to do and practice and change so that you rewire everything in a way that it's working again. All of these things in a layered approach in a slow and healthy way. And what makes you want to do it in the end is your optimism that you can get better. So if you can link that back to your optimism and then understand it just takes a long time to rewire a brain. It takes a long time to learn new habits. And yes, it's a total commitment of you, mind and body, to get into this recovery framework so that you can do your best recovery.
I think you said something earlier, Dr. Klimas, that I just want to make sure that we end on, which is we want you to hold on to hope. We want to bring people to the table that can show you that there are ways to get better, that there are people that can, show or show witness to their own journeys and their own success through those journeys. And also thank you, both of you, for being so candid about the struggles that happened with those journeys as well. We want you to know that we're constantly pulling bright minds, bright ideas, research, science, like you said, Dr. Klimas, super sophisticated technology in to try to unravel this. So hold on and stay engaged and go to ThriveNinety.com and do your self-assessment and get the handouts and let a world-class Olympic trainer, talk about how your body can be reoperationalized, like Dr. Klimas said, kind of repattern when you're off from the path of health. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Really appreciate
Thanks for having us. Thank you guys so much for having us and for everything that you do. I think the information that you share is so critical. And, as the mission says, it really does give people a lot of great information and hope.
Well, let's have you back and take us through some of the practical exercises. I think that would be great for our community.